The gravity on Station Ethelgard was never meant for a species that evolved in the branches of trees. It was a crushing, inexorable force, set permanently at 1.6 times Earth standard. For the Rokari, the massive silicon-based lithoids who built this monstrosity of steel and magma, it was comfortable. For Elias Thorne, it was a constant, suffocating blanket that tried to press his skeleton into dust every second of every day. Elias sat on the edge of his bunk, the metal groaning under the ambient vibration of the station's massive geothermal engines. He took a breath, the air dense and smelling of sulfur and ozone. He had to force his chest to expand against the weight of the air pressure. Every morning was a battle just to stand up. Every step was a deadlift. He was the only human on Ethelgard, a straggler left behind from a diplomatic mission that had gone sour, trading his engineering expertise for sanctuary when his own transport had suffered a critical drive failure. To the Rokari, he was a curiosity, a soft, wet, fragile thing made of calcium and water sacs. They called him the Squish, a derogatory term that translated roughly to that which leaks. They marveled that he didn't simply pop under the atmospheric pressure. They didn't understand that humans are not made of stone, but of tension. We are pressurized vessels of spite and fluid, adapted to survive by simply refusing to die. The door to his quarters slid open with the sound of grinding tectonic plates. Standing in the frame was Overseer Grak. Grak was 7 feet tall and nearly as wide, his skin a craggy landscape of obsidian scales and granite-like plating. He didn't breathe air, he cycled heat. His eyes were burning coals deep within the fissures of his face. Elias stood up. His knees popped, a sound that made Grak wince, or at least perform the Rokari equivalent of a wince, which looked like a boulder settling into mud. Grak rumbled, a sound felt in the sternum rather than heard. The translator implant behind Elias's ear buzzed, converting the subsonic tremors into English. The Overseer says you are required in Sector 4. The primary coolant exchange has ceased. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the tension headache that never really went away. He asked why they needed him. A seized valve was a job for a percussion hammer, not a human engineer. Grak shifted, the stone plates of his shoulders grinding. The heat, he said. The coolant leak has raised the ambient temperature in the maintenance shaft to 320 Kelvin. Our physiology becomes sluggish. Our internal processes throttle to prevent meltdown. We cannot function in that heat for more than a few minutes. You are carbon. You burn. But you do not shut down. Elias let out a dry laugh. It was ironic. The Rokari could withstand the vacuum of space and crush diamonds in their fists, but give them a humid heat wave, and they turned into statues. He grabbed his tool belt, the heavy wrench feeling like a lead weight in the high gravity. He told Grak to lead the way. The walk to Sector 4 was a laborious trudge. The station was a labyrinth of industrial brutalism built for giants. Steps were too high, hallways too wide, the lighting a dim red spectrum that barely registered to human eyes. Rokari workers paused to watch them pass. They stood like mountains, slow and deliberate, their movements governed by the immense inertia of their bodies. They looked at Elias with a mix of pity and amusement. Look at the little soft thing, scuttling like a rat. They arrived at the bulkhead to the maintenance shaft. Warning lights strobed in a dull crimson. Steam, thick and white, hissed from the seams of the door. The heat radiating from the metal was palpable, even from 5 feet away. Grak stopped. He could not go closer. His movements were already becoming jerky, his internal temperature rising. He explained the situation. The manual override valve for the geothermal vent was stuck. If it wasn't closed within the hour, the pressure buildup would crack the planetary crust beneath the station. The entire facility, and the 10,000 Rokari living in it, would fall into the mantle. Elias looked at the door, then up at the massive alien. He asked why the automated systems failed. Grak admitted that the corrosion from the sulfur was worse than predicted. The droids had melted. The Rokari who tried to enter had seized up and had to be dragged out before his core solidified. Elias checked his suit. It was a standard-issue engineering rig, reinforced with an exoskeleton to help him move in the high gravity. But it wasn't an environmental suit. It offered mild thermal protection, but it wasn't a refrigerated tank. He would feel the heat. He cracked his neck. He told Grak to open the door. The overseer hesitated. He warned Elias that the temperature inside was nearly 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with 100% humidity. It was a death sentence for a biological entity. Elias smirked. On Earth, in the deserts of the Middle East or the jungles of the Amazon, humans marched in that. They fought in that. They built civilizations in that. He told the Rockman that humans have a superpower the galaxy always forgets. We sweat. Grak hit the release. The bulkhead groaned and slid upward. The heat hit Elias like a physical blow. It was a wet, heavy wall of superheated vapor. His vision blurred instantly as condensation formed on his eyes, forcing him to blink rapidly. The air tasted of copper and rotten eggs. He stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him to preserve the ambient temperature of the corridor. He was alone. The maintenance shaft was a nightmare of industrial chaos. Pipes the size of redwood trees crisscrossed the ceiling, dripping, boiling condensation. The floor was a metal grate, slick with oil and water, suspended over a dark abyss that glowed red from the magma flows miles below. The noise was deafening, the scream of escaping steam and the rhythmic thud of the station's dying heartbeat. Elias began to move. Every step was a fight. The gravity pulled at his organs, making his heart work double time to pump blood to his brain. Now, the heat joined the assault. His body immediately responded, his pores opened, drenching his skin in sweat. The liquid evaporated in the superheated air, pulling thermal energy away from his core. It was the ancient biological engine of the pursuit predator, the ability to run prey to death by simply not overheating. He climbed a ladder, his muscles burning. The exoskeleton whined, its servos struggling against the heat and gravity. He was 200 meters from the valve. His internal monologue began to race, a symptom of the adrenaline flooding his system. He thought of home. He thought of the blue skies of Earth, the cool breeze of an autumn evening. He held onto those images as anchors, while his reality was a hellscape of red metal and steam. A pipe burst to his left, sending a jet of scalding vapor across his path. Elias threw himself flat on the grating, the metal searing his chest through the suit. He crawled, keeping low. The air was thinner here, easier to breathe, but hotter. He reached the first checkpoint. A massive cog, part of the ventilation drive, had shattered. Shrapnel the size of dinner plates littered the walkway. He had to navigate through the debris field. He grabbed a jagged piece of metal to move it, and hissed as the heat transferred through his gloves. His hands were blistering. He kept moving. Resilience. That was the human word. It wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and then functioning anyway. The Rokari were strong, but when they broke, they were done. When a rock cracks, it crumbles. When a human bone breaks, it heals stronger. When a human mind snaps, it sometimes finds a jagged, crazy kind of focus. Elias found that focus now. The pain in his legs, the screaming of his lungs, the dizzying heat. He pushed it all into a box in the back of his mind labeled later. Right now, there was only the valve. He rounded the final corner and saw it. The manual override. It was a wheel the size of a hatch, rusted shut, encrusted with mineral deposits. It sat directly above a vent that was spewing pure geothermal heat. Elias approached it. The temperature gauge on his wrist suit was flashing error messages. It was hotter than Grack had said. Much hotter. He gripped the wheel. It didn't budge. He braced his feet against the housing, locking his exoskeleton knees. He pulled. He pulled until he felt the fibers of his muscles tearing. He screamed, a raw, primal sound that was lost in the roar of the steam. Nothing. He let go, gasping, doubling over. His vision was swimming. Black spots danced in his eyes. He was dehydrating rapidly. He licked his lips. They were dry and cracked. He had maybe 5 minutes before heat stroke shut his brain, down permanently. He needed leverage. He looked around. There was nothing loose, nothing he could use as a breaker bar, except the railing. It was made of a dense, alien alloy. Elias unclipped the plasma cutter from his belt. It was a tool meant for precision work, not demolition. But he didn't care. He ignited the arc. The blue flame hissed. He attacked the railing, slicing through the supports. Sparks showered over him, burning holes in his suit, stinging his skin. He didn't flinch. He didn't have the water left in his body to spare for a flinch. The railing came free. It was heavy, a 6-foot bar of solid metal. He jammed it into the spokes of the valve wheel. He wedged his shoulder under the other end. A makeshift lever. He pushed. He pushed with everything that millions of years of evolution had gifted him. He channeled the stubbornness of ancestors who walked out of Africa, who survived ice ages, who crossed oceans on wooden planks, who strapped themselves to rockets and shot themselves into the void. The rust screamed, a high-pitched shriek of metal shearing against metal. "Move, you son of a bitch!" Elias roared, his voice cracking. The wheel lurched, a quarter turn. Steam blasted him in the face, hotter than before. The pressure was fighting back. He readjusted his grip. His hands were bleeding inside his gloves. He pushed again. Another quarter turn. The ground beneath him shook violently. The station was groaning, the tectonic plates shifting. He was running on pure spite now. He refused to die in a hole in the ground, on a rock surrounded by aliens who thought he was a pet. He refused to let the soft thing be the one who failed. He heaved. The wheel spun, once, twice. The hissing changed pitch. The roar of the vent began to subside. The valve was closing. Elias didn't stop. He spun the wheel until it locked, until the threads bottomed out. He hammered the locking pin into place with the handle of his plasma cutter. Silence. Well, not silence. The station still hummed, but the screaming, deadly roar of the escaping pressure was gone. The immediate threat was neutralized. Elias leaned against the hot metal of the valve housing. He tried to take a breath, but his lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. His legs gave out. He slid down to the grating. The heat was still there, wrapping around him, dragging him down into the dark. He looked at his hand. It was trembling uncontrollably. He tried to activate his comms, but his fingers wouldn't obey. He closed his eyes. Just for a second, he told himself, just to catch his breath. The darkness took him. Consciousness returned in waves of pain and cold. Elias gasped, his body jerking upright. He was immediately restrained by soft bands. He was in the infirmary. The air was cool, blissfully, sharply cool. It smelled of antiseptic and mint. The gravity had been lowered in this room. He felt light, almost buoyant. He blinked his eyes open. Overseer Grak was there. He was sitting on a reinforced stool that looked like it was struggling to support him. Beside him was the station's medical officer, a smaller Rokari with crystals growing from his cranial ridge. "He is awake," the medic rumbled. "Astonishing." His internal temperature reached levels that should have denatured the proteins in his brain. His fluid levels were critically low. By all logic, his heart should have seized. Grak leaned forward. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone, but his voice carried a different resonance than before. There was no condescension in the tremor. "Elias," Grak said. Elias tried to speak. His throat was dry sandpaper. The medic held a tube to his lips. Water. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. Did it hold?" Elias rasped. "The valve is secure," Grak said. "The pressure has stabilized. The core is safe." "You saved the station, Elias." Elias let his head fall back onto the pillow. "Good. That's good." "We watched the telemetry," Grak continued. "We have cameras in the shaft. We saw what you did." The giant alien paused. He looked at his own hand, a massive fist of living rock. "We are the Rokari," Grak said softly. "We are born of the mantle. We survive crushing depths and the vacuum of the void. We call ourselves the Unbreaking. But we watched you. You leaked. You turned red. You shook like a leaf in a storm. You were dying with every step." Grak looked Elias in the eye. "And yet, you did not stop. When your tools failed, you broke our architecture to make new ones. When your body failed, you used your mind to force it to move. We calculated the probability of your success at 0.03%. Elias managed a weak smile. "Never tell a human the odds, Grak. We just take it as a dare." The overseer nodded slowly. "I have reviewed the files on your species. I skipped them before. I thought them irrelevant. Soft skins from a water world. But I read them while you slept. I read about your persistence hunting. I read about your wars. I read about how you bond with things that can kill you." Grak stood up. He placed a massive hand on Elias's shoulder. He was gentle, incredibly gentle, treating Elias like he was made of explosive glass. "You are not the Squish anymore," Grak declared. "I have issued a station-wide decree. From this day forth, you and your kind are to be known as the Void Walkers, those who walk where the stone cracks." Elias chuckled, which turned into a cough. "Void Walker, catchy. Does it come with a raise?" "Triple rations and unrestricted access to the environmental controls in your quarters," Grak said. "And I have ordered the gravity in the mess hall to be lowered to Earth standard during your meal times. It is a small accommodation." It wasn't small, it was massive. It meant they were changing the station for him. "Thanks, Grak," Elias whispered. "Rest now, Void Walker," Grak said, moving to the door. "The station stands because you refused to fall." As the heavy door slid shut, Elias closed his eyes again. He felt the phantom heat on his skin, the memory of the pain. But beneath it, he felt that familiar spark, that stubborn, burning ember that defined humanity among the stars. The universe was big, cold, heavy, and full of things that were stronger than them. But there wasn't a single thing in the galaxy that could outlast a human who had decided, purely out of spite, that they had a job to do. He slept, and for the first time since arriving on Ethelgard, he didn't dream of gravity. 6 months later, the reputation of humanity had spread through the sector. They were no longer seen as the soft refugees of the galaxy. A Rokari trading vessel docked at Ethelgard. The captain, a jagged elder with moss growing in his crevices, sat in the bar with Grak. "I hear you keep a human," the captain rumbled, sipping a mug of liquid silicate. "A pet?" Grak set his tankard down. The metal of the table groaned. He looked at the captain with eyes that smoldered. "No," Grak said. "Not a pet. A failsafe." "A failsafe? A bag of water?" The captain scoffed. "If the hull breaches, it pops. If the gravity spikes, it turns to jelly. What use is it?" Grak pointed a thick finger toward the corner of the bar. Elias was there. He was sitting at a table with 3 young Rokari engineers. They were showing him a holographic schematic of a hyperdrive injector. Elias was gesturing wildly, explaining something. He slammed his fist on the table to emphasize a point. The Rokari flinched, then nodded eagerly, taking notes. "You see that?" Grak asked. "I see a soft thing making noise," the captain grunted. "That soft thing," Grak said, his voice lowering to a reverent rumble, "walked into the hellmouth of Sector 4. It breathed steam. It grabbed the fire with its own hands and strangled it into submission. It is small, yes. It is soft, yes. But inside?" Grak tapped his own chest, right over his power core. "Inside, they are not biological. Inside, they are nuclear. They do not know when to stop. If you ever find yourself in a room with a human and the alarms start ringing..." Grak leaned in close. "You pray that the human is on your side, because the universe will break before they do." The captain looked back at Elias. The human was laughing now, throwing his head back, his fragile teeth bared in a grin. He looked harmless, but the captain noticed something. He noticed the scars on the human's hands, the burn marks that hadn't quite faded. And he noticed the way the other Rokari looked at him. Not with pity, but with the kind of respect one gives to a dormant volcano. Elias caught their gaze. He raised his glass in a toast. The captain hesitated, then slowly, respectfully, raised his tankard in return. "To the Void Walkers," the captain murmured. "To the Void Walkers," Grak agreed. And in the corner, the soft, squishy human went back to explaining how to bypass the safety protocols to increase engine efficiency by 40%, completely unaware that he had just become the most terrifying thing in the room. The legend of Elias Thorne didn't end with the valve. It was just the beginning. It was cycle 400 when the pirates came. The Vraxian raiders, insectoid scavengers who swarmed ships and stripped them to the bolts. They docked forcibly with Ethelgard, breaching the airlocks in Sector 7. The Vrax were fast, much faster than the Rokari. Their chitinous armor deflected the slow, heavy blows of the stone men. They scurried up walls, firing plasma stingers that disrupted the Rokari's neural pathways, freezing them in place. Within an hour, the raiders had seized the command deck. Grak was on his knees, his systems locking up from the neural venom. The Vraxian warlord, a clicking, skittering nightmare of mandibles and multifaceted eyes, stood over him. "You are slow, stone meat," the warlord hissed. "Your strength is useless if you cannot catch us. We will strip this station. We will leave you drifting in the dark." Grak couldn't move. He could only watch. He knew it was true. The Rokari were builders, endurers. They were not warriors of speed. They were losing. Then the lights went out. Not all of them, just the main overheads. The emergency red lighting bathed the bridge in blood-colored shadows. A sound echoed through the ventilation ducts. A rhythmic, heavy thumping. Not the slow crash of a Rokari step. A fast, driving beat. Thump, 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 thump. The warlord clicked his mandibles. "What is that?" "Check the motion sensors," a Vrax lieutenant chittered. "Something is moving in the vents," the lieutenant reported. "It is small." Fast. Heat signature is strange. It is running hot. Very hot. A droid? No. Too erratic. Suddenly, the vent cover above the warlord exploded downward. Elias dropped from the ceiling. He wasn't wearing his engineering suit. He was wearing a makeshift armor cobbled together from scrap plating and duct tape. In his hands, he held a modified rivet gun, the safety limiters removed, the barrel glowing cherry red. "Get away from him, you bug-eyed bastard," Elias screamed. He didn't fire plasma. He fired superheated rivets at Mach speeds. The first rivet took the warlord in the shoulder, shattering his chitin. Green blood sprayed. The warlord shrieked, a sound that pierced the eardrums. Elias hit the ground rolling. He was moving in 1.6 gravity. To the Vraks, who were adapted to standard G, he should have been slow. But Elias had been living in this gravity for a year. His muscles were dense coils of wire. His bones were hardened steel. When he moved with the explosive power of a hydraulic piston. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a cornered animal. He fought like an engineer. He threw a canister. It wasn't a grenade. It was a pressurized container of coolant he'd rigged to blow. He shot it in midair. The canister burst. A cloud of flash-freezing vapor expanded instantly. The Vraks were cold-blooded. The sudden drop in temperature slowed them instantly. Their movements became sluggish. But Elias was a warm-blooded mammal. He generated his own heat. He dove through the freezing mist, immune to the cold that was stalling the insects. He tackled the lieutenant. He used the rivet gun as a club. He fought with knees, elbows, headbutts. It was brutal, ugly, and effective. The Rokari on the bridge watched in awe. They saw the squish become a whirlwind of violence. They saw him take a plasma hit to the ribs, grunt, and keep coming. They saw him get slashed by a claw, bleed red, and seemingly get angrier. Adrenaline, Grak thought, fighting through the paralysis. The combat drug they produce internally. Elias reached the command console. He jammed a data spike into the port. "Override engaged," he yelled. "Fire suppression system, manual trigger." "No," the warlord screeched. Elias slammed his hand onto the button. The bridge's fire suppression system activated, but Elias had tweaked it. Instead of inert foam, he had routed the steam exhaust from the secondary heat exchangers directly into the bridge vents. Superheated steam blasted into the room. The Vraks screamed as their exoskeletons began to cook. They couldn't regulate their temperature. They began to flee, scrabbling over each other to get to the airlock. Elias stood in the center of the steam cloud. He was sweating profusively, his face red, his hair plastered to his skull. He was miserable. He was burning. But he was standing. He leveled the rivet gun at the retreating warlord. "And don't come back," he shouted. The pirates fled. They detached their ship and jumped to warp, terrified of the station occupied by the fire demons. As the steam cleared, the Rokari began to recover. The neural venom wore off. Grak stood up, shaking the stiffness from his limbs. He looked at Elias. The human was sitting on the captain's chair, panting heavily. He had a deep gash on his forehead. His armor was falling off. He looked like a wreck. "Elias," Grak rumbled. Elias looked up, wiping blood from his eye. "Yeah, Grak. You are bleeding." "Yeah, happens. You jumped from the ceiling. That is a 4-meter drop. Knees are going to regret it tomorrow," Elias winced. Grak looked around at his crew. They were all staring at the human. "You defeated a Vraxian raiding party," Grak said. "Alone." "I didn't defeat them," Elias shrugged. "I just made the environment incompatible with their biology. Engineering." Grak started to laugh. It was a deep, gravelly sound that shook the deck plates. "Engineering," Grak repeated. Yes, aggressive engineering. From that day on, the Rokari had a new saying. When a problem seemed impossible, when the odds were insurmountable, and when the only option was to do something incredibly stupid and dangerous, they would look at each other and say, apply the human method. And Elias Thorne, the stranger in a strange land, just kept fixing things, drinking bad coffee, and proving that while the universe might be made of stone and steel, it bends to the will of flesh and blood. Because stone waits. Stone endures. But humans push back.